Good evening and welcome to yet another interesting session at Chennai International Center. We will begin the program shortly with a welcome address by Anand Raghavan, trustee of CIC. Anand.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and on behalf of Chennai International Center, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to this very special edition. I am told this is the 105th event of CIC in a life which is spanning now over 4.5 years. And this is the third event covering sports. We had one on chess by Vishwanathan Anand. We had one on tennis by Vijay Amritraj. And what more than expecting a very special session like this on cricket, particularly after the famous Gabba victory, which India really sort of produced against all odds very recently. In fact, I was chatting with Mohan yesterday, and Gabba was famous primarily because of the historic tied test, 1960-61 Australia-West Indies. And after that, every touring team to Australia used to play the first test at Gabba, and then second test was Perth, and then Adelaide Oval, and so on and so forth. But this year around, because of the prevailing circumstances, Gabba somehow became the last test. And for India, it really augured well because we produced the most fitting finale to a very eventful tour of Australia with all the bruises and all the events surrounding the tour. I think there are two very important lessons, and I don't want to steal the thunder from two very eminent speakers who are going to take us through the victory, Mohan and W. Raman. But these two lessons are extremely important. These are takeaways. The performance of Rishabh Pant and other youngsters, Washington Sundar, T. Natarajan, they represent the future of startup India. And augurs well because for them, victory meant everything. Defeat never existed in that dictionary. So they went on the fifth day on the premise that we need to win this match, come what may. History is history. Nobody cared whether the fourth innings chase was impossible at Gabba. They just went, did their job, produced the result for the country. That is exactly the startup ecosystem in this country. Youngsters start business on the basic premise that we will win this game. And that's the really mindset issue that is changing the culture of the average Indian today. Second important lesson, Gabba victory, was that one has to believe in oneself to produce the result that they produced. And Ajinkya Rahane, as cool as a cucumber, in all the test matches that he captained India, believed in the basic philosophy that you believe in yourself, do your job, results will follow. We have two very eminent panelists. I know both of them very well. R. Mohan, of course, a very distinguished cricket writer. He started his career in the Hindu back in the 70s and then moved to Gulf Times and then the Deccan Chronicle. Apart from his exploits in cricket writing, a little unknown fact about Mohan is he himself is a very distinguished cricketer. In fact, we played cricket in fifth division league back in the 70s. He was a very, very nippy new ball bowler and a hard-hitting middle order batsman. Had he continued cricket, probably he would have played for India in any case as a cricketer, but he chose cricket writing as his probably passion. But Mohan brings to bear a very long experience of cricket journalism, and he will dissect the Gabba victory that nobody can. W. Raman, of course, all of us know, is a very famous Indian cricketer, left-hand opening bat and a left-arm spinner, and a very important member of the Tamil Nadu cricket team in the 80s and 90s. And he will be in conversation with Mohan. But I surprise packed today as the moderator. The Suhrit Parsarthi, of course, generally we know him as a very distinguished young lawyer, constitutional expert, and a very prolific writer on law matters in the Hindu and other journals. But how he's going to dabble between constitutional law and cricket, we will probably unveil today. So that part of Suhrit will be known today. But this is going to be a very different type of a program. There's going to be a lot of audience interaction. But I think the most important aspect is how do we understand this victory? A to Z is what we want to understand from the experts sitting here. Thank you, Vanita, and over to the panelists.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Anand, and thank you to the Chennai International Center for organizing this. As Mr. Anand said, for followers of Indian cricket from a certain generation, a series victory of this kind was in many ways quite unfathomable. And especially so, I think, after India rolled over for 36 runs in the second innings of the first test at Adelaide, at which point it was hard not to feel a sense of deja vu setting in. I mean, think back to India's tour in 1991-92, where it lost all but one in a 5-match series, or 99-2000, where the 3-match series ended in a whitewash. Now, here we were at the end of the first test at Adelaide. The team had lost its batting linchpin, its captain, who had to travel back to India for personal reasons. 2 of its premier seam bowlers were not even in the squad. 1 other had fractured his wrist in the first match. Virtually every foreign pundit was writing the team off, predicting another whitewash. So who could have really imagined at that point that the team would come back to win the series 2-1? So this really was the stuff of dreams in many ways. And now to unpack this victory and try and understand how the Indian team managed this, we can scarcely, I think, ask for a better panel. We have, as Mr. Anand said, Mr. W.V. Raman, former Indian Test cricketer and presently the coach of the Indian women's team and one of the finest analytical minds in the game. We also have Mr. R. Mohan, resident editor of the Deccan Chronicle, and whose writings in the Hindu and in the Sports Star we could not have but read and admired growing up in the 80s and 90s. So thank you to both of them for doing this. Just one request before I get to the panel's thoughts on all of this. If you have any questions, do kindly post them in the Q&A box, and I'll try and get to them at the end of the session. We'll have a brief discussion with the 2 panelists before a few members from the Chennai International Center join us in the discussion. So let me just, without further ado, get to things straight away. And let me start by getting the panel's thoughts on the culmination of the series at the Gabba. Where does this test win and this series in particular rank in the annals of India's cricketing history? We can start with you, perhaps, Mr. Mohan, if that's okay.
Oh, yes. I would say this is the best overseas win that I've seen India achieve. I've seen them for quite a few times in Australia itself, and from 1980-81 right down to the 90s. I've seen many Australian series, and I know how tough it is to win out there. 1, the sledging. 2, the very atmosphere. They're very, very sporting atmosphere where they rate only people who compete. That's the kind of atmosphere you play in Australia, which is quite unique. And then you have of course, you have the spectators who are always rooting for the home team. That atmosphere is there in any away series, but in Australia particularly so. So to win in Australia is about the hardest thing for the Indian team. I know I've come back disappointed many times. In 1980-81, we managed to escape with a draw, which is a very good performance, actually. It was very, very courageous of the 2 bowlers, Dilip Doshi with a broken foot and Kapil Dev with a hamstring injury. Still, they took cortisone injections and bowled on the final day, and we won. When the target was about 122 to win, and Australia couldn't make it. So that was a great win, but that still gave us only 1-1. And then I was there in 85-86, when we should have again won the series. We dominated it totally, but I think we misjudged it a bit. We didn't try hard enough to win on the final day, and then the rain came at the tea interval. We needed just about 80 runs to win when the rain started pelting down at tea on the final day. So, that was very, very disappointing to come so close in Australia and still not make it. And again, of course, in 2017-18, we did win the series, but this was far better. In the 2017-18 series, or was it 18-19, they didn't have the opener and they didn't have Steve Smith. So, there are 2 great players missing from that lineup. So Australia could always say this is the B team. So this is the full Australian team they could field in the final test. And we beat them when it came down to the decider. And the sheer raw courage of it all, the physical battering that our batsmen took, not only batsmen, I mean, people like Ashwin, you don't call him a specialist batsman, but he's an all-rounder. So the kind of beating they took on the physically, and Cheteshwar Pujara, both of them, and the kind of courage, the bowlers showed in sticking to their task. I think this is the finest performance in an away series that I've seen, because it is hard for the batsmen as well as the bowlers. And we performed on both counts. I wouldn't say that much about the fielding, but batting and bowling were tremendous in this series.
Mr. Raman, to get to Gabba, we have to possibly start at the beginning, perhaps in Adelaide or even before that. And in Adelaide, when everything seemed to go a bit pear-shaped, when India, was rolled over for just 36 in the second innings. Did you see it at that point as only an aberration, really? Because I've listened to an interview with the team's present batting coach, Vikram Rathore, for example, and he says that the 36 was a bit of a freak occurrence, that it wasn't necessarily bad batting. It was just one of those days where every good ball seemed to fetch a wicket. So how did you feel at that point of time? And in the sense, to come back from that, at least, I mean, if anything else, it would have been very, very difficult from a mental perspective. But how do you see, I mean, what do you think contributed to the team's ability to come back from that kind of a down in Adelaide all the way to the Gabba on for the fourth day?
Yeah, after the Adelaide Test match, I was asked this question a lot of times. I go for a round of golf. People who come across being was the only question they used to ask was, "What's going on? 36 all out." So I was consistently maintaining the view that it was something which was really freakish, in the sense that everything was getting nicked and going to the slips of the keeper. I remember in one of my shows, Kapil Dev was talking to me about that World Cup game where we were 5 down for 17. And as he walked out, he asked Yashpal Sharma to please as to what was going on. So he said, RA. So similar thing was happening. Everything was getting nicked, going to the keeper or the slips, as I said earlier. If you cast your mind back to the Melbourne Test match, there was a similar session of play where there was a lot of play and miss, but none of them got the edge. So it was really a matter of a case of millimeters making a lot of difference there. In Adelaide, everything, in a matter of 15 overs or 20 overs, whatever the number of overs, the Australians got everything right. It was their session. The batsman obviously could not explain that debacle either, because what do you do when you go out and get out and come back in the blink of an eye? There's nothing to analyze there. There's nothing to really sort of see where things went wrong. So you had to say, okay, we got to try and do something when we get out onto the field next time. But for that to happen, they needed a spark. So came from the best person in the team possible, a guy who's taken over the reins because of Virat coming back. Ajinkya Rahane provides that spark. He gets a fantastic 100, and he gets supported by the lower order like Jadeja. I personally feel that Jadeja could do a lot more with the bat in Test cricket, or the other way of putting it is that he's got to be given more responsibility. Once that happened, once the 36 thing was gotten over and done with the performance, the first innings in the Melbourne Test match, I think the boys would have definitely got the confidence that, yes, we are in there. The resurrection is happening. So let's carry on the momentum that we achieved in this innings and get on with things. And that's exactly what happened. They kept improving innings after innings in every respect. I think even before we even think about why this was supposed to be, or is definitely the best series win ever, we got to cast our minds also back as to what exactly the players went through in the preceding months. Let's not forget they did not have a good outing in New Zealand. After that, not much of cricket. All of them were stuck at home. For a side or for a unit that used to be on the road for almost 10 months in a year, they were at home more often than not, which again was very difficult. And not only that, they had to obviously go to Australia, which is a very tough place always to go and compete and win. And over and above all that, they had to do well in that series, given the way the format of the Test Championship was changed recently. If they were to do badly there, they might probably would have been looking down the barrel as far as the Test Championship is concerned. So given the facts that prevailed, the factors that prevailed before they went to Australia and what happened there, and they had to improvise because the team management, the team was getting stifled by some bad luck or the other in terms of injuries, in terms of having to battle with various restrictions. Obviously, that is something that they could not do away with. But if you take all the factors into consideration, I think there is no doubt in my mind that this is something which will be very difficult to be repeated.
Now, Mr. Mohan, Mr. Raman spoke about, the comeback at the MCG, the first innings resistance, Rahane's innings, Jadeja's contribution to the bat, and how once the 36 was put out of the team's minds, it sort of allowed them to focus on what they do best. But we've also seen what's come before the Australian tour. I mean, he mentioned the series in New Zealand. But we've heard of the coach Ravi Shastri, for example, speak about this being a 5-year-long culmination almost, that this sort of victory didn't come just, overnight. It's something, it's a large group of players that we've used, but it's also been a culmination of a long-term plan. We've had chases that have not gone well for India in recent times, where they've, either gone for the target or tried to play time, and things haven't quite worked out. We've been bundled out in fourth innings in the past in recent tours in England and in New Zealand. So what do you think has changed in the larger plan, in the sense of what the team is doing right? What has it worked on, and why do you think it's able to achieve these kinds of results? And how do you think it was able to achieve these kinds of results in Australia this time? What has really changed over the last 4 or 5 years? Or perhaps even longer, over the last decade or so?
Is Raman taking that?
No, I mean, whichever one of you is comfortable taking it. Yeah.
I'll just chip in briefly to say that, yes, it's part of a process that wins and losses do come. But one thing in the modern cricket, what has helped is playing so much white ball cricket, where, there is no draw. You just have to win or lose. So that kind of conditions you, gives you a positive thinking that, even if it looks impossible, in 2 overs, you have to score 40 runs to win, you still go for it. So that's a kind of positive energy that white ball cricket has given cricket. So we got to accept that. We tend to put T20 cricket down, but it teaches a lot of things. It teaches you how to win and even how to take losses too, how to come back from defeats. I mean, in a T20 game, you could get washed out in a day and come back the next day and have a phenomenal performance. So that's always possible. That helps. The mindset helps. Second is, I would also think that IPL has helped in many ways in conditioning these players, coaching these players, the big team atmosphere, that has helped. And so they come ready-made for international cricket. I was really happy when I saw the bowling combination for the final test, because we had fresh legs. For the last test match, we didn't have tired fast bowlers. We had really fresh, keen, young bowlers there to bowl. That I think was important. Usually, I've seen tours of Australia where we have played for 100, 110 days. And at the end of it, you would see them, they would be bone tired. They can't even get up from the dressing room chair. That's the kind of, physically down they would be when they expect to go out and play. I've seen them really, grown-up men could cry in that situation. But here we had a lot of fresh players coming in because of the injuries, because of the circumstances in the series. I think that helped. That really helped to have young players, keen players, very positive and playing for victory. And I would credit the whole thing to Rishabh Pant really, because he played 2 innings in the last 2 test matches. One that almost gave us a victory or a glimpse of victory. And then the second one, he actually stayed there till the very end and saw it through. I think that was a champion performance. So I would credit...
Possibly Australia, as you say, might have even missed a trick there in the sense of retaining the same bowling attack through the 4 test series. And at the end, of the fag end, some of them looked a bit tired, especially Stark looked quite worn out, as you said. I mean, so possibly having fresh bowlers in our team might have made that little bit of...
That's true. Yeah.
So, and you... sorry, yeah.
Bowling. Final test.
Right. So, Mr. Raman, Mr. Mohan has brought us to an interesting kind of transition and the role that the IPL has played in changing the mindset of the players. But I want to also make a counterpoint there and kind of get your thoughts on both sides of the issue. Now, there's this question of intent. We've seen the transformational role played by Rishabh Pant in both the Sydney Test and in the Gabba Test. But at the same time, we have someone like Pujara, who, strangely enough, came under quite a bit of criticism in Sydney from the Fox commentary team in Australia, for example. There are obviously different ways to bell a cat. But the IPL is a much maligned tournament. In some quarters, T20 can sometimes be looked down upon as a pastime that isn't really cricket, but we've seen that it has changed the way players approach the game. But at the same time, on the other hand, you have players like Pujara who've grown up entirely in the first-class setup. I mean, it's also harsh to say that Rishabh Pant himself has played a lot of first-class cricket. So obviously, in terms of preparation for the test team, one can't but say that that first-class cricket still plays the most important role. So I want to kind of get your thoughts on both of these things, in the sense of the positive impact that the IPL has had, but also possibly why, in focusing perhaps too much on T20 cricket, I mean, I don't know if that's quite happening, But if we were to lose our inherent focus on the first-class game, we might not be able to produce players of the ilk of Pujara possibly in the future. Is that a worry in some regard? So I want to get your thoughts on both of this.
As far as the system goes, in terms of domestic cricket structure, I think we got the best. There's no two ways about it. The other factor is that guys who are brought up on the duration format of the game, that is playing the 4-day format of the game more often than not, they start doing that even from the under 16 levels. What it does is that if you can succeed in the longer duration, it's easier to adapt to the shorter format in terms of skills, in terms of technique, everything. But in terms of intent, what happens is the reverse. The shorter formats provide you with the fearlessness. Otherwise, batsmen generally brought up in the traditional format of cricket alone and downloaded on the fact that they need to succeed in Test cricket for them to be recognized internationally. They do not perhaps develop the fearlessness that the players brought up on the shorter formats do. So this has become a good kind of amalgam if you look at the combination of the side. Like we are talking about Rishabh Pant. He is brought up, in an atmosphere or in an environment where he's allowed to play shots. The very fact that there was a lot of criticism for regularly playing him the 11 Test cricket has been kind of nullified because of the faith that the team management showed in his batting abilities. I think they were taking a little bit of a chance, but these are risks that you take on any kind of tour, especially when you're battling the odds. In terms of the IPL, what it has done is that it has removed the anxiety factor that creeps out of the lack of familiarity with the other top players of other nations. Now, in the IPL, what happens is all of them play together. They socialize a lot, so which means that that kind of a wall which used to prevail when only Test cricket was the only format of cricket that was played in the earlier decades. There used to be a lot of uncertainty as to what is going to happen in a Test match, how good is he, what is he capable of doing, what is he developed, in the gap that we had in between two series. So there are a lot of things that would probably go in the players' minds, but because of the constant interaction that they have, even if it's on an annual basis, they get to learn as to how each other prepare for a different series and when they visit different countries. So all these things has helped youngsters, especially in not having that kind of discomfort when they are up against the top players of other countries in international matches.
This is obviously a great Test series victory. We've seen that a large number of players have been used. We've had debutants come in the final Test match at the Gabba. We've had Washington Sundar, Natarajan, Shardul Thakur, who is virtually playing his debut Test, given that he barely played in his first Test match. So, but where do we go from here? In the sense of what is next for India? There's the ICC Test Championship, but before that, there's the England series at home. Because we know that great teams go on long winning streaks. They're able to win in all kinds of conditions. They're able to maintain consistency. So what must this team really do to attain greatness, in the sense of how do they keep this momentum going? I just want to get your thoughts on that and get both of your thoughts on that. Really.
When we had the
I think in the first place...
teams, Go ahead, Wood. Go ahead.
Now, in the first place, before we even want to sort of set a benchmark or clearly reveal what our expectations are, it is important for us to define what greatness of a team is all about. I think once we define that, we'll be able to be in a better position towards going in that direction. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit muddled. Now, as of now, what is very obvious is that we got a pool of 35 players who can compete and also overcome the obstacles in international cricket in any format. So the tricky part from now on will be in picking the combination. First of all, start off with the squad and then the playing 11. Otherwise, given the following that this game has and given the propensity of anybody and everybody wanting to have a say on every decision made by the team management, there's going to be a lot of confusion going around. But that is what makes everybody's job interesting, especially the members of the team management, also of the others in the fraternity who are contributing towards the development of cricketers for the national team.
Right. Mr. Mohan?
Yeah, I mean, historically, if you look at it, I mean, the West Indians, they dominated Test cricket in a certain era, and they tried to win everything. They tried to win every series they played. And then you look at the great Australian teams, two of them, the first one won 16 Test matches in a row before they lost one in the Eden Gardens. And then there was another team, again, did a streak of 16 wins in a row before not winning the 17. So the benchmark is already set. So there's no reason why Team India cannot aim at that. Why can't we win 15, 16 Test matches in a row? So wherever we are playing, whether it's in India against England, where we think we are formidable, we are unbeatable, etc., we still have to prove it by winning all the Test matches. And then you go to England for the final of the World Test Match Championships. I'm sure we will, and we should win that too. That's a kind of positive energy this series has given, and I'm sure everyone will be aiming at that. Now we got to look at it positively. The great Australian teams, when they were dominating, they scored at 4 runs and over. It didn't matter who the opponents were. They were looking at being 325, 350 at the end of day one. That's the kind of thinking that we have to bring into our cricket, and we have the capacity now. We have the batting, we have the all-rounders, we have the fast bowlers. So everything is in place. It's now up to a captain or the management and in whole of Indian cricket to take this up as a challenge and show that we too can win 16 Test matches in a row.
Right. Just before I bring the others in from CIC, and I mean, there's been a lot of talk about this being a new India, right? In many ways, before the series started, Greg Chappell described Kohli as the most Australian, non-Australian cricketer of all time, and he didn't take very kindly to that. But he said that this is a new India. Now, there have been few who've drawn larger cultural and I think even political links between how the Indian team performed and the state of the nation today in many ways. But this isn't the first time India is winning a difficult series away from home or performing well away from home. We've had great performances of yore. We've had the likes of Sunil Gavaskar taking on the mighty West Indian fast bowling attack. We've had J.R. Vishwanath taking them on, and even the early outs. I mean, you've had the team of the Tendulkars, Dravid, Lakshman, Sehwag, Ganguly and Kumble, and none of those should be paltered with. Those were all great teams in their own rights. So I'm just wondering how the team itself might view something like this sort of larger comparison that's being drawn and these cultural links that are being drawn. Do you think that kind of plays into their mindset at all, or do they just focus in terms of, largely focus on getting things right in the field? Do you think that this kind of talk gets to them in some ways?
Raman, you take strike.
I think the boys are aware as to what they have achieved. They will definitely enjoy the success that they had. And they all have played enough cricket. They've all been through a lot of things together. And I'm sure they realize once they are through with the series, that's over and done with. That's history. And they like to get on and try and replicate it in the next series that they play in. That's the way these guys are programmed these days. And with somebody like Ravi being there, he'll be very quick to point out if these guys get into that complacency mode, because he doesn't speak much, but when he speaks, he makes it very clear. He can be in the face at times, but that is required too when you're handling a team and you're looking to really raise the bar every time you walk out onto the field.
I think any new young player coming into this side will come in full of confidence. He knows he's walking into a champion team, a champion dressing room. Somebody like, say, Axar Patel will probably be taking the role of Jadeja, and when Jadeja is not fit. So I'm sure he'll play full of confidence. He'll be there to try and deliver from ball one. So this is a new Indian team, really. I mean, you look at it, this is the dawn of a new era where we have achieved something that looked impossible. Now we know what our capacity is, what our capabilities are. And so I would expect any youngster walking into this team to be able to perform as well as the very, very seasoned cricketers like Virat Kohli himself coming back. And also, importantly, I think we have also shown that there are two ways to play this game. You can be led by someone like Virat Kohli in your face, kind of demonstrative captain. And then you have somebody like Ajinkya Rahane, who's almost like asking Buddha to lead a cricket team. So, you can do it either way. There's no set rule that this is the only way you can play and win cricket. This is the only way you can compete. You can do it in many, many ways. But now what we have learned is that we can master it in many different ways.
Right. Thank you very much. I'll just request Vanitha to introduce the other the members of the CIC who have a few comments and questions to pose to you.
Thank you, Suhrit. So today we have a very interesting session where some of our own CIC fellows will be in a conversation with the main speakers. I'm very happy to welcome Ramki of Spark Capital, Meera Nair, Sumant C. Raman, the well-known sports analyst, and Tariq Akbar to join us, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jump on board.
Good evening.
Yeah, hi.
I'll request Suhrit to carry on this conversation.
Sure. I mean, any of them who have any thoughts or would like to get the panel's thoughts on any particular point, in relation either to the Gabba test or to the series that just went by.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
Yeah. Have we successfully moved beyond reliance on individuals to building a team? If yes, how did we do?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. In fact, what this test series is proved is, once again, is that it's a team game, that contributions need to come from almost just about everybody. And that's exactly what has happened. If you look at the resurrection part of it, you had Jadeja contributing with a bat, and you had Saini, a real rookie, picking up wickets. And then you came to the Sydney test match, you had Ashwin really battling it out and enabling India to force a draw there in the company of Bihari. All these guys, despite the fact that they are up against the odds on the field in terms of cricket, they also had injuries to battle as well. So mentally, physically, and tactically, they were really tested, and each and every one of them, not to forget the debutants like Siraj and Washington Sundar and all of them have showed that they are capable of contributing. And one of the biggest plus points of this tour is that each and everybody is put his hand up and done what is required of them under adverse situations. So this is once again reinforcing the fact that in cricket it's a team game, especially in a tough series and a tough test series, especially that everybody needs to come to the party and do their bit.
Suhrit, can I ask a question? Yeah.
Yes, please.
My first question is to Raman. Raman, hi. My question relates to how Mohammad Siraj, Navdeep Saini, and Natarajan and Washington Sundar are going to be utilized once all the first team players get fit. Now, some of them are getting on in years, because if you take Saini, he's 28, Natarajan is 30. Would you, as a manager and coach with your experience, would you recommend some kind of a rotation policy to be followed for the Indian team? For instance, we are seeing England actively take this up. They're sending Johnny Bairstow back for the first two tests, and then he comes back for the third test. So would you suggest something like that? Or, these players could potentially miss out on playing for India for an extended period of time once Bumrah, Shami and the others are back?
Yeah, it's a problem of plenty at the moment. But if we look back as to how these guys came into playing test cricket, it's very simple. Some of them went as net bowlers. Some of them were earmarked for the T20 format. Some of them were earmarked for the 50 overs format. But situation as it developed there forced the team management to consider anybody and everybody was available. It almost came to a stage where even Ravi might have thought of, getting his gear back. So the thing is that they would obviously try and see how best to earmark the individuals for different formats, because they've got the T20 World Cup coming up. They have the Test Championship, and they also have the 50 overs World Cup coming up shortly. Obviously, we can't wait until the last minute to prepare for that. So grand plans will be made with respect to each and every major championship that we could be playing in the future. Yes, it could be a case where it will be very tough on some if they don't get games to play, but that's how the cookie crumbles. It's a good situation to be in as far as the team management is concerned. But as a player, is it a good situation to be in or not? I don't know, Suman. because
Yeah.
you're going to be disappointed more often than not.
Correct.
And it's basically situation based. Nobody can be blamed. That's the way it is.
Mohan, I have one question for you. You spoke about this, captains being of different types, and you can have aggressive captains and do well, and you can have calm captains and do equally well as long as the team is winning. Did you think that the players, looked a little more relaxed in the latter part when Ajinkya Rahane was at the helm? And the second question is related again to this. As a rookie player in the team, or somebody who's just come into the team, what does your what are you thinking of? Let's say you drop a catch and you see the captain visibly express his frustration. Does it not help to have somebody who's more supportive in terms of being calm and so on? So I'm just trying to understand, would a calmer captain help the Indian team, or it just doesn't matter especially where the new players are concerned?
I think it cuts both ways. Sometimes you have martinets as captains. You have somebody who's very demonstrative like Virat Kohli. He lets his disappointment be known to the entire stadium. So it's a little tough playing under captains like that, because you're always a little tense, a little more nervous. Whereas somebody like Rahane is very calm, very composed, but mind you, he's a very aggressive captain. If you see his field placements, he has more closer to the bat than Virat would ever think of. So it's not as if Ajinkya Rahane is not aggressive in his own way, but it'll be probably easier to play under somebody like Rahane, who's more composed, who's able to take he knows that, we drop catches, we drop 10, 15 catches in the series. It happens. So we can't sort of, come down like a pile of bricks on one guy who's put down a chance. So, it would help the youngsters, yes. The seasoned players might be able to take it because they've been through the situations many times. So they don't mind. They've played under tough captains. But then the youngster coming into the team would probably prefer an atmosphere which is calmer. But then this is international cricket, It's not played, it's played with a certain competitiveness. So you can't avoid that. And as you said, about rookies coming in, certainly they'll feel calmer. But I'm sure Kohli himself knows that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he knows things have changed just a little bit, that he can't be what he was before. Maybe he has to tone down just that shade to be a better captain. I think he would have realized that seeing it in Australia when he was not there, that there are different ways to play, different ways to win, and different ways to handle the events on the field. So I'm pretty sure seeing this, that Virat Kohli will be a different man in the series to come.
Raman, you agree with that, with what Mohan says? Or that Virat needs to tone it down a bit?
The thing is, Sumant, as long as the players know it is just a momentary reaction of the captain and it's not taken further off the field, the players are fine. When they see Virat, they know what exactly he would do, what he would not do, what he doesn't like. But again, as Mohan said, it's also a platform where you have to play tough cricket. You have to be on top of your game almost 100% of the times that you play, but that is not possible. But the players by now are aware of Virat because he's not been leading 1 year or 2 years. He's been leading for a while. They know what his temperament is. At the same time, they also know that it could have been perhaps different under Rahane. But at the end of the day, the players, by far, they don't mind who's leading them and how he reacts. They are looking on doing what best they can, and that's how it should be as well.
If I may,
attitude and self.
Oh, okay.
Sure. No, whichever one of you would like to go. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Does attitude and self-belief trump ability and skills?
What is that? Sorry?
Does attitude and self-belief trump ability and skills?
Attitude and
self-belief.
Self-belief.
I think it'll definitely trump the other two attributes you said, because if you don't have the right attitude and if you don't have self-confidence, no matter what amount of ability you have, it may not be your ally. It may not help you to succeed. The standing example is the current team coach, and also you have a Pujara also to a certain degree. You wouldn't call him as extraordinarily naturally talented, but his self-belief and attitude, you see the way he operates on the field. It's not easy playing test cricket alone and succeeding, because a couple of nicks, if he doesn't get runs in a couple of innings, his place is in danger. There's always that threat, at least in his mind. So players who are playing only test cricket, it's very difficult for them. But if you look at it, they've managed to do, and they're proceeding towards greatness only because of their attitude and self-belief. Obviously, ability is there, but that can vary. Yeah, the natural ability can vary in terms of percentage, but like you rightly said, attitude and self-belief are the two most important things.
Thanks, Raman and Mohan, for that brilliant analysis. I want to take this to a slightly, broader plane. The role of a coach has historically been under-recognized, and Ravi Shastri, in the instant case, motivated, rallied around, and kind of got the best performance out of a team, which had a stand-in captain and a bunch of, let's say, wet behind the ears, but charged and great youngsters with a devil-may-care attitude. I want to pick on what Anand alluded to in his opening remarks and get your perspectives on stretching this analogy of the role of a coach in a sport to that of a mentor in today's era of startups, and what lessons could be gleaned from the sporting field. I know you have written about it. You're a coach yourself of great standing, and you have written about it in your book, The Winning Sixer. So if you can throw some perspectives, that would be helpful. And then I have a follow-on question.
Personally, I would sort of draw an analogy as to the role of coach, especially when it comes to cricket. I would say that the coach is something like the service engineer of an aircraft. His job is to fine-tune all the parts and make it ready for the pilot to have a good flight. By that I mean the coach will try and prepare all these players, if required, mentally, tactically, technically, and physically, and hand over the team to the captain. Once the team takes the field, it's all the job of the captain to ensure that things are done the way they should be, and they all do things that fetch them success. In terms of the lessons that you can perhaps learn on this tour is that there are times that you have to do what you do not like to do. For example, being in the hotel room and your movements being restricted, you would have been really sort of choked in a way. It was not easy for these boys because they were doing that from almost from August, just before the IPL, and that it carried on for months. It was not easy at all. But at the same time, what I feel also it did to those boys being there is that it gave them time for introspection, which means looking at the mirror is very important. Whereas if things are normal, what tends to happen is that you go and play, you spend time with your teammates and go out for a meal or whatever, and then you get to meet a lot of fans, and obviously you have developed a friendship over the years. What would happen is that you would be all over the place. You would probably have a lot of conversations. The flip side of that is sometimes the wrong things can keep niggling in your head, especially when it comes to inexperienced cricketers. From some conversations they would have had with their colleagues or with the team management or from the former cricketers in the fraternity. So restricted movements and minimal conversations have also been helpful in their own way, I think, because of the restrictions they had to live under due to this pandemic. The other thing is that in terms of management, maximum utilization of your resources. Generally, what we tend to do is that we try to be judgmental. We say, okay, my frontline people are not there. I'm left with the second grade team. What do I do? It's not happening. It's easy to give up. But the fact is that there you get an opportunity to create a second line of defense which can go to become as good as your front line or your second performance. And also the hallmark of a leader or a captain is that his team performs as well, whether he is there or not. There's so much of talk about Virat Kohli not being there in an important series, but the point is that he's been handling this side for a while. Even the fact that he was not there, he had a deputy who was in sync with the Virat's way of thinking and the pathway where they wanted to head in the next few years. It is very important to create an atmosphere where everybody is convinced that together they have to go in a certain direction and they have to go through these processes. If that is in agreement, I think the leader has done his job, be it Rahane, be it Virat Kohli, or be it Ravi.
Okay. Fair enough. Mohan, I just had a follow-on question for you. This is something that you spoke about a little earlier in your main narrative. Greg Chappell, writing in the morning Sydney Morning Herald, says an Indian wannabe gets the cricketing equivalent of a Gurkha military training program. And then he goes on to allude to Australian cricketers as weekend players, right? And so on and so forth. I'm just trying to double click on that. And trying to see if the rise of star cricketers in current day, particularly from the non-metro locations and from economically challenged families, is akin to the emergence of software professionals in the 80s when India got a renewed self-belief with the 1983 victory. And you saw a whole generation of first-generation graduates kind of go out and perform and conquer the world. So, would this, in a way, you think will inspire people to take to sport, not necessarily cricket, as a serious profession or as a serious career option? Albeit, it may not be in the same quantum and in the same set of numbers, but do you see this as some kind of a watershed moment?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the Indian cricketer, I would say today he's the ultimate professional in world cricket because he doesn't have to do anything else. If he plays a season of IPL, his income for the whole year is set. He's playing only for a month and a half or 2 months of IPL. And then his income for the whole year is set. He doesn't have to worry about a thing. All he's thinking about is cricket 12 months a year. This is probably what Greg Chappell was meaning, that, the Australians are weekend cricketers. You get picked for a team, you come and play, and then the rest of the week you do nothing. But here the Indian cricketer is tremendous to have the IPL as a bank for him, to give him enough financial stability, not to have to worry about that. This didn't happen to players of, say, Raman's era or even previous eras. I mean, there were times when 50 rupees was the test match fee for a cricketer. So you can imagine, today they walk in as crore-patis. People who not even played a first-class game get into IPL and they earn a couple of crores in a season. So I think it's a phenomenal improvement, but that takes the weight off your mind. That allows you to think of just cricket 12 months a year. You don't worry about anything else. You don't worry about feeding your family, what would happen to this or that. So that is a tremendous improvement. That is something that IPL has given Indian cricket. Of course, the others are also coming here to earn their money, but only the top stars. You can play only four foreigners in 11 in a match, and you have a cap on the number of foreign players you can hire as a team, as an IPL team. But they also come in here. They go to various other places to play IPL, not IPL, to play T20 cricket. So today's, the cricket economy has changed more so for Indian cricket. For the average Indian cricketer, the stars are fine. I mean, people like Smith or Labuschagne or any of even the youngsters of Australia today can go very, very far afield. They can play Caribbean T20, they can play Pakistan T20, England 100, whatever. They can play anywhere to earn money. The Indian player is far more financially secure today. This is quite opposite days when people didn't have money even to think of a meal in the evening. I've seen this, the favorite restaurant abroad used to be McDonald's because it was effective, it was cheap, a burger or something and make do. Today, you can imagine a cricketer where he would like to dine. So that's definitely transformed the financial stability, the mental peace. It's transformed Indian cricket. Thanks to IPL, thanks to the kind of pay that even average first-class cricketer gets, even if it's non-IPL, is getting a couple of lakhs per playing day. I think that is phenomenal. That has changed cricketers to a large extent.
Tariq, if you'd like to get a comment.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks, Surat. This is a question directed to Mr. Raman, and I'd love your opinion as well. Mohan, it's ironic that this kind of comes at the end of the session, but there's always been gender disparity, right? I mean, there's gender disparity in every vocation, every field. Sports definitely has gender disparity today. Mr. Raman, what's the future for women's cricket in India? Where's that heading towards? I mean, is there a future? What's the roadmap according to you and Mr. Mohan? I'd love your.
I think the future of women's cricket is really bright. The girls have done extraordinarily well in the last 5 years. The trial run has been conducted in the last 2 years for their IPL. It's been dubbed as the Challengers Series. But the IPL is definitely going to take place for them maybe in another 2-3 years' time. And once that happens, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of girls taking up cricket. The other important thing is that the ICC has also introduced the Under-19 World Cup for them, starting from this year, which means that the void that was there in the grassroots levels of encouraging young girls to take up cricket, that will also be filled up with the inception of the Under-19 World Cup. As far as I see it, cricket will become a career option for the girls in the future as well. And in fact, I'll go to the extent of saying cricket can only become a multi-country sport, or probably include more countries into cricket under its fold will happen only through women's cricket in the future.
That's a really interesting point in the sense of, because men's cricket we've seen, now restricted to 10 test cricket playing nations, and it hasn't really kind of kicked off across the world as one might have expected it to. We don't see the likes of Kenya and Netherlands, etc., which play in the World Cups, playing more regularly against the better teams. And in fact, even in the World Cups, we often seem to have this. We've now again gone back to a restricted format where we don't have the so-called minnows playing anymore. So that's a fascinating point that you make in the sense of how the growth of cricket might be linked in many ways to the growth of women's cricket. There are a few questions from the audience, and I'd just like to post that very quickly. There's one question on the potential composition of the Indian team for the upcoming England series. And it's something that both of you had touched upon earlier, but we'll have some players coming back in, obviously. But there's also the likes of Jadeja who are going to be missing. But would you, for example, this is a question from Mr. N.B. Ravi, but would you, for example, play Rishabh Pant as a batsman and have Saha keeping, because it's possibly more important and harder to keep up to the spinners in Indian conditions? Or would you retain Pant as a keeper? Where do you see Pant's role, for example, in the future? I could get either of your thoughts on it.
I would continue with Pant because that's the only way he's going to improve. Now, if you're going to think of him as a match winner, just to think of him as a match winning batsman alone is not going to really be enough. If he can improve upon his keeping, then you've got a fantastic all-rounder in your ranks, a match winning one at that. By not playing him and shielding him is not going to help anybody, because that is going to upset the balance of the 11 as well. Okay, so what if he misses a couple of chances? He's going to get better. The more he plays, the chances improve of him becoming better. The other way of looking at it is, unless he plays, how is he going to improve? So that's the question that the team management needs to probably address. I'm sure they would probably stick with Pant, especially with the confidence that he's gained with his match-winning knock in Australia. And that confidence will hopefully rub off onto his keeping as well. He's not had a bad series as a keeper compared to a few misses that we've seen him indulgent in the earlier series. So all factors are conducive for Pant to be continued as a frontline keeper batter if you are going to look at the future.
Right. There are two questions, and I'll post these to Mr. Mohan first, from M. Rajshekhar and Srinivasan Ramanujan. They pertain to the Australian team's sort of lack of planning potentially. I mean, and we touched upon this earlier in the sense of them retaining the same bowling attack through the course of the series. The question really is, would they have been helped by potentially having another supporting spinner to Nathan Lyon, or should they have like kind of mixed the pack a little bit more? And what really might have prompted them to retain the same sort of bowling lineup, especially through the course of the series? Do you think that they got it wrong on that?
I think maybe they're pressing their main fast bowlers too much, and somebody like Pat Cummins reveled in the kind of hard work that he had to do right through the series, but the others were not coping to. If you looked at Hazelwood, he looked so good with the new ball, but then you look at it, 10 or 12 overs down the line, he's not the same bowler. So you could see that they were, flagging a bit in the course of a day or even in the course of a test match. So, maybe they would have done better had they shuffled their combination, but I don't think they have a better spinner than Nathan Lyon at the moment. So they may not think too much about it. Although I think they could have bowled a lot more of even the occasional leg spin of Marnus Labuschagne. They could have tried that a lot more than they did. Even when the wickets were turning and the Indians were doing so well, they didn't think of giving too many overs to Marnus. I think that was one of the tactical mistakes they made. Whereas Rahane wasn't that, and he was able to toss the ball up to the spinners. Even with the new ball, he brought on Ashwin so early to try and exploit a little bit of moisture in the wicket on a first day, and a little bit of, with the new ball itself helping the spinner carry the ball, carry little bit of bounce extra. That helped Ashwin. So I think, tactically the Australians were way behind. I think Tim Payne was too aware of his own weak position in the team, that maybe he could lose the captaincy. Maybe, his batting form wasn't good enough. So he was under too much pressure, too much home pressure. And that can happen to Australian captains. When they're playing at home, they can be under enormous pressure, just as we are. I mean, I'm not saying that Virat Kohli or Ajinkya Rahane doesn't take that pressure. There is probably much more pressure on an Indian captain than anybody else because of the sheer number of millions of cricket fans and followers. But the pressure on an Australian captain is pretty high when you see the media. The kind of comments they make there is quite extraordinary. So it's not easy captaining Australia in Australia. I mean, Alan Border would tell me that he would be under more pressure. He was happier leading teams in India than back home. So that does happen. Home pressures are different. Our own captains know that. But, that's about the green. You've got to be ready to play anywhere.
Right. There's just one final question from the audience, from Mr. Sanjay Chaganti. And Mr. Mohan, you mentioned this, but I'm going to post this question to Mr. Raman. I mean, he mentioned about the tactical preparation for the series. And his question to Mr. Raman is, he wants to hear your perspective on Ravi Shastri, given how closely you know him, in the sense of how he might have helped shape the tactical preparations for this series. And, he himself has had really fine performances as a player in Australia, and to what extent that might have helped him kind of shape the team for the Australian series, and how he might have helped contribute to this.
Ravi is a guy who basically first works on the mental side of the game. He would try and ensure he makes the players feel comfortable. He will motivate them. He'll give them all the encouragement required. And he'll also tell them the kind of chances that they're likely to get. He is very, very clear in his communication. And tactically, there have been quite a few statements made by Arun and Sridhar and the rest of them, like Ravi taking Pujara somewhere out for batting after dropping him from a test match. He worked on a couple of minor things, and Pujara after that has got back into his rhythm. Similarly, he would also try and look at what needs to be done. He is not a great one for technique as such. He is one who works more on the mental side of it and more of being tough and being ready and prepared to perform. That's his forte. He's not much into technique otherwise. But I can assure you that handling youngsters is really good. He'll make them feel like they're veterans of 70 test matches when he talks to them. And sometimes the guys might wonder what is it he's on about. I'm just a rookie coming into the team. But he'll make them feel at home and make them think with the kind of motivating talks he gives them that they have already played 70 test matches and have achieved greatness.
Right.
Suhrit, can I ask one last question?
I'm just going to throw it back to all of you if you had any other comments to make.
Yeah, just one question to both of you. Is cricket gradually dying out or shrinking? I asked this question, I think Suhrit touched upon it briefly. But the reason I ask this question is over the last 15 years, we have seen at least 2 or 3 top flight teams drop off the pace. We've seen the West Indies drop off significantly. We've seen Sri Lanka now, the last 3-4 years, except for the odd occasional performance, they have dropped off completely. And of course, Bangladesh hasn't, is also sort of dropping off the pace. Now, international cricket at the highest level is now being virtually restricted to 3 or 4 teams. I mean, India, Australia, England, and even South Africa has started to sort of drop off significantly. So we are not getting teams coming in as replacements for or people who can occupy the top slot in place of these teams. And there does not seem to be any emerging country which could take up the place of some of these teams which are falling off. And Mohan, you would know very well, and Raman too, that in West Indies, they're finding it difficult to even get, despite the Caribbean Premier League and so on, they're finding it difficult to get enough of players motivated enough to move out of soccer and into cricket. So do you think that the ICC needs to seriously do something about this situation? Because, the series outside these 4 teams are now seen as a kind of a one step below the highest level of cricket.
Mohan, you go first, Mohan.
Yeah, I think, we are looking now, if you look at the television revenue coming in, there seems to be 2 kinds of cricket, one for the elite teams and one for the not so elite teams. So, that's a kind of natural selection process that's going on. We can't help that, until there is more money, more viewership coming in from television, you can't build an infrastructure. And the on-site audience anyways dropped off, even in India. If you opened up Chepak tomorrow for a test match, you probably won't find it full. Maybe today, because we have had a team coming back from Australia after having won such a wonderful series, you might have a huge crowd turning up. But normally at a test match in Chepak today, you can't imagine you would have crowds like you did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That's gone. So it all depends on television now. And it's a tough job even for ICC to be able to maintain the kind of standards that can get you into the elite zone. Like Sumant, you said about Sri Lanka going down. That's very strange because Sri Lanka had a lot of talented young cricketers coming up who are natural fits for the new kind of white ball cricket. They all step in there and they can do some phenomenal things. So I think what is happening to world cricket is, although we know Test cricket is what is going to produce good cricketers for you, quality cricketers who will do well in the white ball cricket and the shorter versions too. But despite that, what is happening in the future in cricket is there will be far more of ODIs and T20s and less of Test cricket being played. I mean, this Test championship is good. It makes everyone play in the format, but I don't think we can sustain that. So we got to look at what total revenues come in and how we can use that to help all the forms of cricket. So that's where the difficulties for ICC is going to lie in keeping all the formats of cricket alive, including Test cricket, but depending on the kind of TV revenues that come in. So that is the real challenge.
On that point, there's also one question from the audience, from Mr. Raman. If I may just ask this specifically from Mr. Bharat Ram, he says that apart from the last 2 tests that lasted 5 days, most test matches these days don't seem to be lasting the distance. And there's been some people who've been votaries of the 4-day test. And now, of course, if the SCG test and the Gabba test show us anything, it's that we need the 5-day format. But is there a case made in that, at some levels to also possibly experiment with 4-day test matches to see if interest can be sustained in that way. And your thoughts on that and the other question as well.
No, I don't think you need to change the number of days. What happens if test matches start finishing in 3 days? Do you again go back and say, let's have a 3-day test match? No, I don't think that's going to be a right path to take. As regards the earlier question that Sumant asked, yes, countries are finding it as a big challenge to retain the interest of youngsters in cricket. It's a real challenge even in England and Australia, even though their sides are good, they've been doing well. Probably around the start of the millennium, the ICC could have toyed with the idea of a 2-tier test system. They could have probably made the Caribbean islands play as an individual nation as they do in athletics and other sports, because Caribbean cricket is struggling for the main reason that cricket is expensive there. Traveling to those islands is expensive. Accommodation is expensive. The individual boats are not strong financially. Perhaps they could have tried 7 or 8 nation 2-tier test system. That could have maybe made the games more competitive, because evenly matched teams are playing against each other. But I think for that to happen also, it's a bit too late now. They got to try and really think hard as to how to make the other nations strong and want to play test cricket, because the other lure for players from the other nations is that their Premier Leagues sprouting up in every country. So most of the players are happy to try and go and play those Premier Leagues and make their money, and just not want to go through the pressures of and the rigors of test cricket. It's tough. Maybe a time will come, like we became the outsourcing hub in the IT industry. That might perhaps happen in cricket as well, because for the sheer number of cricketers we have and the kind of talented cricketers we have in terms of numbers. Let's see if that is something that will come up in the future.
Suhrit, I have one question that is to Mohan. Mohan, do you think the 1976 fourth innings chase in Port of Spain was qualitatively and quantitatively a better fourth innings chase as far as India was concerned than Gabba? Those days, uncovered pitches, much more West Indian fast bowling and all that, or you would rate this a better chase?
I would rate this far higher, because this wicket is far more competitive on the 5th day. You know, until the 4th day, it was really playing up. Maybe it didn't play up as much on the 5th day as everyone thought it would. It was probably the cracks didn't open up, and we had an easier time batting on the 5th day than on the 4th day when the Australians were struggling. So that was there. But I think this chase is better because in 1976, I was told the West Indies were at the weakest point. Their fast bowlers were not good. You know, when the famous saying that thou shall not bowl, they had an opening bowler called Thou, and the crowd used to chant, thou shall not bowl. So, you know, they had weak bowling attack. They played 3 spinners in that Port of Spain test against Clive Lloyd's wishes. So, you know, that helped change West Indian cricket, because the next one was a fiery blaster of a wicket they gave at Jamaica, you know, at Kingston, Jamaica. That was a totally different wicket because they lost that chase. They lost in the chase. West Indians changed their entire tactics, and Clive Lloyd started picking 4 fast bowlers and saying, I'll kill the Indians. So they changed their entire attitude and approach to the game thanks to that chase. So that helped change the history of cricket, and we had the great West Indian spectacle of, you know, 4 fast bowlers bowling in every test match. So that changed cricket in a way. Maybe this Gabba win also will change cricket in some ways, I hope.
Suhrit, if I may ask one question.
I have one question.
I think Meera and Ramki both had raised hands.
Can I? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
This is a follow-up of what Mr. Raman had said earlier. Do you think India has done a good job of succession planning and creating shadow resources for critical positions?
Yes, a very good robust system is in place. If you look at what has been happening in the recent past, is that Rahul Dravid has been given the responsibility of the India A teams and the under-19 team, which obviously happened to be the feeder system for the national side. So that is where a lot of these guys have been spotted, and they've been nurtured, and they've been prepared. And not only that, there's also a lot of development programs that are being conducted for the junior level cricketers as well. So which means that cricket system, as far as development and providing experience and also nurturing is concerned, we are unparalleled, and it's definitely going to continue. It's going to get better and better, and we can only go from strength to strength.
Slightly tangential question, and I don't want to miss the opportunity when I have a great sports journalist and a professional cricketer. I want your take on esports and how much esports could potentially, kind of disrupt conventional field sport. I mean, everything is going the digital way. Currencies are going digital, and people are kind of spending time on the device that they have. So, what is your take on esports? And there's a lot of money there.
I think it's very, very interesting to play esports. I mean, when I was very young and the first of the Nintendos were coming into the world, and you got absorbed in trying to catch those guys falling off the parachute. It could become an obsession. So I can imagine today's youth what they're going through, having all these gadgets and devices all their lives. I can see it in my grandson. He knows how to operate a cell phone far better than I did. I had to learn the process. He doesn't have to become ready-made for these things, for devices. So it's scary what we are becoming, that we are losing the great outdoor life because of this. But I think there is a future for esports, because that gives you a kind of vicarious participation in things that you can't do. There are only 11 players who can play for India. For a huge country like India with 1.3 billion people, and only 11 of them can represent India on any given day in a test match or even a ODI or T20. So there is not enough motivation for a billion people or youngsters or 500 million youngsters tomorrow who can't make it to the Indian cricket team. They would probably be happy playing esports. And I wouldn't grudge them that, because I've seen how these things have grown with the leap in technology. I'm sure only those games will get even better and better. And the television, they present esports in quite an attractive way now to be able to get in a lot of income from that. So that's not a bad thing. If you're a hobby can make you some kind of pocket money you can earn from a hobby, that's terrific then.
I think on that note, if I can just request Vanitha, because I think we've pretty much run out of time. If none of the members have anything more to add, I can request Vanitha.
Thank you, Suvred. Anybody wants to share anything else before we conclude the program? Okay, so thanks. It was again a very wonderful session, and thanks to Raman and to Mr. Mohan for joining today's discussion and making it very interesting. And what I liked about the contribution from CIC Fellows is I think we covered every aspect of the discussion, right from women and esports and many more. So thank you all again, and we hope to see you all at the next program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.